Hi guys, welcome back to HaryPhamDev channel. In the previous video, the part 1, we already done the basic setup for our bot. Until now, the bot can display the Get Started button for new customers, showing a persistent menu beside the chat bar, and send a welcome message with their Facebook username if a user presses the Get Started button. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to display the quick reply buttons, showing categories in the store with the Facebook carousel template. With this product, we will have a button to view that product on Amazon and a order now button as well. Last but not least, we're gonna do the lookup order feature. You will know how to embed a custom web view inside the messenger. We handle the customer info at the Node.js server, then send back to the Facebook. For example, I will send the customer name, the email address, and the order number. That's what we do in this video. Let's get started now. The first thing we'll do in this video is to mark the message has been seen, and showing the three dots indicates that a new message is coming. To do that, we need to use the sender action. We have three options: mark the last message as read, turn typing on, and the last is turn typing off. We need to use the sender action to enhance our customer experience during the conversation. We need to send the typing on indicator when our bot receives a message it will respond to. That helps create a conversation experience. We need to mark the message has been seen when our bot receives a new message so that the user doesn't feel they're ignored. To display the sender action in the conversation, I will copy this sample request, copy this request, and update our code. First, I create a new function, send typing on. We need the sender ID, sender PS ID, and then a error function. Inside this function, we will return a promise and use try and catch to handle exception. We reject any exception we have. Another function is the mark message has been seen, mark message read. We also need the sender PSID to mark their message. We need to export the function to use in the controller file, send typing on, and mark message has been read. I will paste what we copied before right here and add a comment. We need to make a request to the Facebook server. So I will copy this sample request, copy this one, and update our try function. Paste right here. We need to change the URI parameter. So I will create a new one. Let URI equal use the bytecode. I copy this URL and update our URL parameter. We need to use the page asset token and change the API version to 6.0. To use the request, we also need to provide a body along with the request. So I will change the method to method post, and then come back to our function and copy the syntax. Our body will send with the JSON format, and what we send is a request body parameter. I delete this one. and resolve a message done. Reject that error. And then I create a new variable that request body is a JSON object. The first field is the recipient, and I will copy this one and update the request body parameter. Delete this one. We update the ID field. The ID is the sender PS ID, and the action for this request is turn typing on. I will copy this function to update the mark message has been seen. We only change the sender action, so I will go back to the document. Sender action we need to use is mark seen, so update this field to mark seen. We use the same URL, so no need to change the request parameter. I only update the function to return a promise to ensure that we get the result we want. You try and cache to handle exception and reject any error we have. I will cut the function and paste inside the try function. Machine, the sender action is the machine. Now we have two new functions, send typing on and mark the message has been seen. Before we send a new message, I will mark the user message has been seen. So we need to update the call send API function. First, we call the message, mark the message has been read. Then we will call the function turn typing on to indicate that a new message is coming. We also need to pass the sender PS ID as the input for each function. Go back to our page. I will delete our conversation and reload the messenger. Now we have the Get Started button. Before we update our code, I want to show you what we've done so far. If I press the Get Started button, as you can see, although our bot already read the message Get Started, but the message doesn't mark as read. And then when our bot sends the welcome message, we didn't see any indicator showing that a new message is coming. I will go back to our page and delete the conversation again. Reload this page. Now we will update our code and see what will happen with our bot. We will deploy our code to the Heroku again. Now try again with our bot. I will click on the Get Started button. You can see beside the Get Started button, we have the logo of our bot. It means our bot already read the new message, and then a new message is coming. You can see the three dot typing on indicator. To make it more clear, I will send more message. I will send more than one response for our bot whenever a user presses the Get Started button. So copy the call send API function and mutable to the file time. Git add our file, git commit the message, update, and then git push Heroku master. We update our server code again. Try again with our bot. First, I will delete the conversation. Then click on the Get Started button. Now you can see the typing on indicator whenever a new message is coming. I will remove all these lines. We only call the send API one time in this block code. To separate our bot action, I will create a new service, Chatbot service. First, I will require the .env package to get a set to our environment variables. Then go back to the homepage controller. We need to copy this line, a paste aside token, and create a new function, send message. We need to know the sender PSID, who will receive our message, and a response parameter. We also need to export this function to use in the controller file. Export the send message function. Copy this one and update the function. Next, I will import the request package to send a request to the Facebook server. This function will return a promise, a resolve and rejects parameter. We use try and catch again. Try and catch exception. Reject the exception if we have any exception during calling the Facebook API. I will copy the call send API function. Copy the request. And then update the send message. We use await, so we need to add a thing at the start of the function. We will change to resolve a message and reject any error we have. I delete the import request package and import the new service we just created. Import Java service from the service folder, Java service file. Then remove the page aside token. We will update our function because we used the call SunBI before. Now we change to use our service. Use async and await for a asynchronous function. Right here, I will await the Chatbot service, then call the send message function. We pass the sender ID and its response. Update the function as well, Chatbot service, then send message. I remove the call send API function. Nothing to change with the handle setup profile. We only update the function used the send API function before. We need to update the get started button. Now I want to send a welcome message to the new user. So use the Java service and call its function send message welcome new user. And remove all this line. I will create the new function in the service file. Let's say message welcome new user. We need to know the sender PSID, and inside it also is a function to return a new message. I create a new variable like username. We need use async and await for asynchronous function. So use the homepage service and get the Facebook username by passing the sender PSID. Then don't forget to export the new function to use in the controller file. I create a new response for our bot. The first response is sending a text message, and the second response is to send a image message. Create to respond, and finally we need to await for the send message function. We pass the sender ID and then pass the response we want to send to our user, response 1, then await send message to send the response to. After we send the message, we want to finish this function to use the resolve and a message done. This is how we send a text message. We use the text field, and beside it is a text message we want to send to our user. To send an image, we use the attachment structure. Inside the attachment, we need to define the type is the image, and the payload include our link to the image. I already shortened our image link, so it will be easy for you to type the image link. I also want to send another message, so I create the response free, and it is a text message as well. Finally, I will send a quick reply to our user. A quick reply will provide buttons for our customer to choose. So the next thing we will know is what is a quick reply message. This is a quick reply message. The quick reply message will provide a text message, and below it is the button. It like when we send a text message, we will have a few options beside this message. So copy this syntax and update our response. I will change the text message. We don't need the image URL. We only need to show the button. I will change the text message. What can I do for you today? With this response, we will have a text message. What can I do to help you today? And below it is three options. The first option is showing the categories button. We need to set a name for this payload. And then we do the same thing with the lookup order button. We set the title and change the payload name. The payload name is like a ID for the button. We use the payload name in the handle post by function to handle the user action whenever they click on a button. The final button we will define is talk to an agent. So change the title, talk to an agent, and then change the payload name. The payload I will use is talk to an agent, talk agent. This is how we send a quick reply message. To see what we've done so far, I will deploy our code to Heroku again. Git add our file, git commit, and then git push Heroku master. Whenever a user click on the Get Started button, we'll call the Chatbot service to send a welcome message. We notice this line because in the service file, we already done the step send a message. I will deploy our code again. In the send message welcome new user, I will send 4 messages. And we have 3 types of message. The first is a text message. The second is an image. And the last one is a quick reply. Let's see what's new in our bot. Delete the conversation. Click on Get Started. So now you can see we have a text message as the first one, a welcome message, and the last one is a quick reply. The next thing we will do is to handle whenever a user click on a button, a category button, a lookup order, and then finally a talk to agent button. I will copy the payload name and update the controller file. To handle a quick reply, we need to check the message. Although we use a button with a prospect name, but the Facebook response doesn't like the handle prospect function. It's more like a normal message. So we need to update the handle message function. First, we need to check the incoming message is a quick reply or not. Add a new comment. Check the incoming message is a quick reply. I will use a if condition. We will check the message. If we have a new message and the new message, this is the Facebook response. Inside the messaging object, we will have another object message, and inside the message, we will have the quick reply and its payload name. I will copy this syntax. We will check that if we have a new message and that message have the quick reply field, and inside the message we have the payload name. We know that it is a quick reply. So add this condition, and then I create a new parameter to get the payload name. Let payload equal message.quickreply.payload. After we handle the quick reply button, I will exit from this function, so use the return command. I use another if condition. I will check the payload name. First, we will check if the user pressed the category button. Then, we'll check the user pressed the lookup order button. Finally, user pressed the talk to an agent button, so update the payload name. Copy this one and update our field. To handle the action user press the category button, we call the Java service and create a new function, send categories. We also need to pass the sender ID to send message to the user who presses our button. We do the same thing with the other button, call the Java service, and then use its function. send lookup order, and finally request to talk with an agent. I will create the new function in the service file. Export this function first, send category, send lookup order, and finally request to talk to an agent. Create the new function right here. The first is request to talk to an agent, pass the sender ID, and inside it we will return a promise. You resolve and reject parameter. We use try and catch to handle exception, reject exception. I will copy this function and paste right here. We only change the name of the function. Update this one. Request, we have a request. So send categories. Now I will update the send categories function. In this function, we will send a generic template. I want to send a generic template, a slide of image to our user showing all the categories we have in our store. First, I will create a new parameter that responds. Use async and await for asynchronous function. We will wait for the send message to send our message with the sender ID and the response. And finally, we will return this function a message done. We need to update the response parameter. So you need to search for messenger message template. Click on the first one and find the list template. To make a horizontal images, we need to send a carousel template. So I will copy the example request. We only copy from the attachment field. So copy this one and update our response. Inside our response is a attachment field. We use a type is a template, and the payload we use is a generic template. Inside the element, each element is a image and a title. Next, I will update the persistent menu. I will change the payload name. I want to have an option to restart our conversation so the bot can send the welcome message again, and a new title to view info about your website. I will send a view Facebook fan page. This is my Facebook fan page. And then finally, another option in this video, I want to send info about my YouTube channel. So I will update this URL. I update the send lookup order because we call the function, so we need to exit from the function with the resolve function. I will deploy our code to Heroku again. Git push Heroku master. Let's check our bot. First, I delete our conversation. Then press the Get Started button. We have a welcome message, a image. I click on the categories button. Now we have a carousel template. You can see the title. The first title is welcome, welcome 1 and welcome 2. We only update the title. If I click on each item, you can see we will open the item link inside a new tab. And we have two buttons, view website and start chatting. And if I click on the persistent menu, we don't see any change because we doesn't call the API update user profile. So go back to our app on Heroku and go to the link set up profile. I will submit this request and see what we have right now. Reload our page. Something is right here. Our persistent menu doesn't get updated. So let's see what we have. The persistent menu have too many elements. By default, the persistent menu only accepts the maximum 3 elements. So if you want to use more than 3 elements, you need to use a nested menu. And to do that, we use the type is the nested. The first type I use is the prospect, and the last type I use is a nested. And inside it, we will use another field called to get action. The call to action is an array, and inside this array is our button. And I will tag our persistent menu as a local environment. So run our app, go into localhost and go to setup profile, click on the submit button, go back to our page, reload this page, click on the persistent menu. Now you can see we have a nested persistent menu with the view info button. And if I click on the button view the Facebook fan page, it will open my Facebook fan page. It means our persistent menu will fine. Next, I will update our carousel template. We need to change the image URL and the title. This is what I do for our template. First, set the title for the first category, headphone, add the image URL, the subtitle, and the default action. If a user click on our image, it will open a new tab to view that product. Then below its image is two buttons. The first button is view on website, and the second one is show detail about that category. We also need to set the payload name to handle this action. The second category is the TV. You also need to update the image URL, the default action to open the category on a new tab, and update the button as well. And the last one is presentation. Update the image URL, the URL to open in new tab, and the button as well. With the demo purpose, I only demo 3 categories. We have headphones, we have a TV, and finally we have the PlayStation section. To see what the template look like, I need to update our code. I need to update the code on the Heroku server. So git add a file, git commit, and then git push to Heroku master. I delete our conversation. Click on the icon, then delete the conversation. Get started. We have the welcome message. I will choose the categories. Now you can see this is the carousel template I used in this video. We have an image, a short description about the category. If I click on an image, you can see the product on Amazon. Because we choose the type of that image is a web URL. So whenever I click on an image, it will open up a new tab to view the link we embed behind the image. And then we have two buttons below the image. If I click on View on Website, we will open up a new tab as well. With the feature, you can view the product on your website. The next feature we will do is to show detail about that category. We need to update our code to show the headphone, the PlayStation, and I will handle the feature restart this conversation as well. To handle the action restart this conversation, we need to know the payload name and then update the handle property function. First, we need to update the payload name. I will change to restart conversation and the talk to an agent button as well. Go back to the handle prospect function. I will create a new payload. I also update this payload talk agent, and then we create a new case talk to agent, and we need to add a break line. We have a new case for restart the conversation. Because I want to send again the welcome message to the user. If the user click on the button restart conversation, we do the same thing like when user click on the get started button. So we no need to separate into two cases to do the same thing. We only need to use one case. It's called fall through and we have a no break between the cases. Next, I will update the send category function. We create a new case for each button. The show headphones button, add a break, and another case. We have 3 buttons, so we will have 3 cases. Copy this one and create a new one. We have show headphone. We have another button to show TV. And then a button to show PlayStation. I will comment this one. To show headphone, we will call the service and its function. Show headphone, we pass the sender ID. We do the same thing with show TV. We use the service and its function as well. Copy this one and update the show PlayStation. We have 3 new functions: show headphone, show TVs, and then show PlayStation. We update the service file. Export the new functions, show headphone, copy the function name, show TV, and the last one, show PlayStation. Copy the name and update the function. Then I will call the function talk to an agent if the user click on the talk an agent at the persistent menu. I will create the new function. First, the show headphone. We need to pass the sender PSID. And inside it also is a promise, return new promise, resolve and reject, a try and catch function, reject any error we have. And finally, to exit from the function, we use a resolve and a message done. Copy this function and I will double it and change the name for show TV. And finally, the name for show PlayStation. I will create a new file, a template. We need to separate the response message into a new file because if we keep in the Chatbot service file, this file will be quite long. It maybe will include more than 1000 or 2000 live code. It will like a nightmare if you want to maintain our bot. So create a new file, template message. I will separate the response into a new file. This message response is quite long, so I will create a new one for this response. The first is a send category template. This function simply returns a string object. So I need to copy this response and then go back here and paste right here and we return the response. I will simply this syntax return our object. Copy the name and export this function to use in the service file. Go back to the Chatbot service. We need to import the template. Import template message from the template file. Then I will update the response message. Instead of using response right here, we will use the template message and call a function. Next, I will create a new response for the show headphones function. Use the template message and call its response. Then headphone template. After that, we use the send message to send response. Use async and await send message, passing the sender PSID and the message response. We need to create a response for this function. Create a new function, send headphone template, copy this one, and paste right here. We only change the name of its function. We also send another carousel template if a user click to view detail about that category. We need to update the image URL and its button. Instead of view product, I change to the button audio now. And we need a button to go back to the category. So change the payload name back to categories and change its title back to categories. Copy the buttons and update the TV section and update the PlayStation section. We need to update the URL. Delete this one. Change the title and the image URL. I remove this one and this one. We need to update the image and the URL. So this is what I do to update our template message. First, I update the title and the image URL, add the subtitle to display the price for each product. Then we have a URL to order that product. And then finally, the button back to category. We have another product. We do the same thing with another product, and this template will send 3 products to the customer if the user press the show categories button. Next, I will handle the feature back to the category, create a new cases, and update the case name back to category. We use the Chatbot service and its function back to category. And don't forget to pass the sender ID as the input parameter. This function really simple. We only call the send category back. I need to update this one. Update the sender PSID. Let's see what we've done so far. Update our code and deploy to Heroku again. Let's test our bot. I delete the conversation. I click on the categories button. And this is the carousel template. And to show headphone, we have 3 headphones and its info, the arena button, and the by to category button. I will click on the by to category and we go back to the category and I test the restart the conversation. It doesn't work. Something's wrong here. I forgot to update our persistent menu. I changed the payload name for the persistent menu, but I didn't update the profile API. So go to the setup profile API and click on the submit button. Reload our page and try again with the restart conversation. Click on this button. Now you can see we send the welcome message again. And the category button is work fine. If I click on the image, it will open a new tab to order this product on Amazon. And I will go back to the category. I also update the image URLs to make our carousel display nicer. So we only need to update the image URL for each product. I will update our code to see the new images. I choose showing category and show detail about this category. You can see the image is better now. The next feature we will do is to finish the feature lookup order. To do that feature, we will use the Facebook webview. But before we doing that, I will send a message to our user. So create a new parameter, response, and use the template message. Send lookup order template. And use async and await. Await the send message function, pass the sender PSID and the response you want to send to the user. Create the new function in the template file. For this response, I will send a button template. A buttons template provides a text message and below it is the button for the user to choose. So copy this sample request. Only copy from the attachment field. and update our function. Return an object and paste the plug code right here. I need to change the text message. Okay, let's set info about the order so our bot won't ask in the future. And then update our button. I will set two buttons. The first button is to open a web view, and the second one is to go back to the main menu. Paste right here. We need to change the title set info and the payload set info order. And the second button is to go back to the main menu. We update the payload name as well. Back to main menu. Inside the handle prospect, I will update the function to handle if the user click on our new button. The first one is set info about the order, and the second one is to back to the main menu. To set info about order, we use the service as well, called the Chatbot service, and its function set info order by webview and pass the sender PSID. With the back to main menu option, we call the Chatbot service and the back to main menu. I will create the new function in the service file. Paste right here to export the function and create a new one. Create the second one, back to main menu, export this function first, then create this function. We return a promise to ensure we call the Facebook APIs first and try and cache. I will copy the plug code and update the back to main menu. I create a new response and use the template message and its function to create our response, the back to the main menu template. And then use async and await, add async and await right here to call the sendMessage function. Pass the sender ID first and then the response message. I need to create the new function in the template file. Export this function first, then create the new function. Let's back to main menu template. I want to send a quick reply message to our user, so I return a object, and inside it is the quick reply message. We do the same thing like when we send a message to welcome a new user. So I will copy the response for, copy this block code, and update our function. With this message, we will provide a quick reply to user with 3 buttons, a showing category button, a talk to an agent, and finally, a button to look up your order. I will copy the back to main menu. I want that each category will have a button to go back to the main menu. So update each category. Until now, we have 3 categories, so we need to update 3. We need to update 3 times with each category. And update our code to see what we've done so far. Git push Heroku master. The test about. I will restart the conversation. Click on the restart option. Now we have the message welcome new user again. I choose the button categories. We have a carousel template showing detail about this category. I will test the go back to the main menu. Now we have a new option to go back to the main menu, and I press 1. If I click on the lookup order button, we have a button template, a text message first, and 2 buttons get info. If I hit the set info, nothing happened. So the next thing we will do is to handle a messenger web view. This is the messenger web view. The Facebook Messenger platform allows you to open a standard web view where you can load web pages inside Messenger. This lets you offer experiences and features that might be difficult to offer with the message bubbles, such as picking products to buy or days to reserve. To use the web view, the first thing we need to do is to create a view at our server. So go back to our code, and in the view folder, I will create a new view. The info order is a HTML page, so I copy the profile, then paste right here. We change the title to info looking up order. And update the body tag. Because the Facebook Messenger is designed for the mobile first, so we need to make a responsive template to fit into the mobile device. To do that, I will import the Bootstrap 4 framework and the jQuery library. And then we will load our custom JavaScript file to validate at the front end. To use the Bootstrap 4, I will search for Bootstrap 4 online, click on the Get Bootstrap, and copy the link to use the Bootstrap 4 CSS. Update our web page. Next, we will find the jQuery online. We will use the jQuery CDN. We copy this link and update our page again. To load our custom JavaScript, we will write our JavaScript file in the JS folder. It is the static file, so we will write the static file in the public folder. And I create a order.js in the JS folder. We also need to use CSS for our webview, so create a file in the CSS folder, style.css. I will load our custom CSS and add the relative is style sheet and get the CSS in the CSS folder. Then the name of the CSS file, style.css. Next, we will design our webview. I use the first div and a class container. After that is another div and the class rows, and inside is the class column. I use the column 12 to maximum our display on a screen. Use an other div, text sensor, and expand auto lookup to make a title for our form. Another div with the class form group to make a label and a input into a group. And the label will display first and then our input. We need to set the ID for our input, a class form control. I will copy this div. I only change the label to email address and then the order info. I use another span to tell that it is a required field with the color red. Update the type to the email and change the ID. Change the label to order number. I copy the span tag and update our order number. We also update the ID to order number. Finally, we have a button to submit our form. We use the class button primary to make a blue button. Set an ID for this button file order, and then add a stake file order. I will add a footer for our form. To make a space with the top, I add a class merchant top 3. To test our webview, I add a new route, router.get/info order. And then a controller and its function to handle this route. Homepage controller and use the getInfo order page. I will create this function in the homepage controller. Export the function first and create the new function. Let getInfo order page use the request and response parameter. And this function simply return the EJS file. Return response.render. The EJS file we want to render infoorder.ejs. I will run our server at the locals to test the webview. npm start. Open the browser and go into localhost port 8080. We will get the route getInfoOrder. This is our webview run at the node server. I will add some style to make the form look better. First, I add a footer, some information about the webview. And then I make a new div to use the bootstrap validation, a div with a class invalid feedback, and the text I want to display if the input is invalid. And I add a new class Victory for the container. Reload our page. Now you can see we have a footer below the form, but I want to make the footer stick into the bottom of this page. To do that, we need to use some CSS class. Open the style.css. With the body, I will use the display flag, and flag duration is column. And then write the fixed height class. I will set the form with the mean height 100 viewport. Reload the page. Now you can see our footer is to stick at the bottom. Next, I will add CSS for our title lookup order. Add a new class. With the spawn, add a new class title. Copy this one and write the CSS class title. The font weight 600 to make a bold text and increase the size. The next thing we will do is to validate if the user click on the Find Order button. To do that, I will use a query. Use the syntax document.ready to load our JavaScript function. And then I will trigger the event if the user click on the Find Order button. But before our user submits the form, we need to validate our inputs. I need to ensure that the user is already filled the email address and the order number field. So by default, this function will return false. It means that we don't have any validation error. To set the email, I use $sign and the ID for the email. And then the order number, $sign and the ID for order number. I will check that if the value for the input order number is empty or not. If it is empty, we will return true. It means we have a validation error and we need to add a CLI class to indicate that we have an error as the class is invalid. In the else function, we will do the opposite to the if function. We will remove the class is invalid. To validate the email, I will use the regular expression for the email. I will check that if the email is match our regular expression. If the email doesn't fit our regular expression, we will return true. Otherwise, we will remove the class is invalid. Copy the class and paste right here. Inside the event, click on the submit button. I will create a check variable, and its value we get from the validate function. I will console.log the check variable to see it will return true or false. Reload our page. I will open the console.log. First, I click on the file order. The function returns true. I will add a class is invalid to the email input. You can see we have a red border around the invalid input and a red text to showing the error. But something isn't right here. Although the email address is empty, but we doesn't show the error. Let's check our code again. I made a silly mistake. We need to add the class is invalid if the email doesn't fit our regular expression. Let's try again. Reload our page. This time we have the error. We need to fill out our email address. And I will add a valid email. Then we will check the order number. You can see if we don't have any validation error, the check variable will return false. After we validate the input fields, we will call the node server to handle the user action. I will use Ajax to call the Node.js server. $.ajax. Inside it is an object. The first parameter is the URL. Use the backtick, then $sign, curly braces, window.location.origin to get the base URL, and then slash set info order. The method I use is the method post. And then the data we send is a data object. If we success, we will get the data response from our node server. I simply console.log the data. If we have any error, we do the same thing, console.log the error. We need to create the data variable. Let data equal an object. We will send the customer name, the email address, and the order number. Another thing we need to do is to create an input field to save the PSID. The user PSID is the sender ID. We need this field to send the message to the Facebook user. Notice that I use the hidden attribute, so in our form we don't see the PSID input. The first parameter we will send to our node server is the PSID. We get its value by use its ID and then use the val function. We do the same thing with the customer name. Use its ID, $, and then the ID, customer name. Use the val function. After that is the email address, the email. Use the ID for the email and the val function. The last thing is the order number. We use $, the ID, and the val function. I will copy this file and update the Node.js server. We create a new route, the post route, for the setInfo order. We need a controller and its function, homepage controller, setInfo order number. I copy the function name and update our controller. Create the new function with request and response. Inside the function, I will return a response.json. If we success, we will send a status to hundreds and a message OK. Restart our server and check what we've done so far. Reload this page. I will submit the form. We have a validated error. Fill out the email address and then the order number. I submit the form. We have a response from our server, a message OK. It means our server can receive info from the client side. The next thing we need to do is to use the Messenger SDK to get the user PSID. Scroll to the session Messenger extension SDK. And this session requires a domain whitelisting, but we already configured the whitelisted domain for our bot. And update our JavaScript file. Open the order.js and paste the plug code at the top of this file. Load the Facebook SDK. After that, we need to wait for the SDK being loaded. So copy this function and update our code. To get the user PSID, we need to use the function getContext. I click on the getContext document and copy the example. Copy this one and update inside the function. After we get the thread context, we will set the PSID to the hidden input by using jQuery $sign PSID and set the val is the thread context.psid. If we have any error, we simply console.log that error. To separate our code, I create a new function if a user click on our button. I will remove the main function. After we set the PSID to the input field, we will call the function if a user click on the handle. I will update the app's ID and the Facebook app ID we will get from the process.env. I used console.log to see if we can get the Facebook app ID from the process.env or not. In the .env, we create a new variable Facebook app ID. We need to get the Facebook app ID. To do that, open your app and then click on the app ID. I copy the Facebook app ID and run our service again. Reload our page. We get an error, can't get the process.env. At the front end, we can't use the syntax process.env. We only use the process.env at the backend. So to get the Facebook app ID at the front end, in the backend, I create a new variable Facebook app ID and I get its value from the .env file process.env.facebook app ID. And then when we render our view, I will pass the Facebook app ID along with this view. At the info order, I create a new script to get the Facebook app ID with the EJS syntax. So at the order.js, we have the Facebook app ID variable. Restart our server and see we can get the Facebook app ID or not. This time, we have the Facebook app ID. The next thing we need to do is that after the user submit our form, we need to close the webview. So add a new comment and go back to the webview document. We need to use the request close browser. I will copy the request example, copy this one, and update our code. If we have any error, we simply console log that error. That's what we need for the web view. Before we deploy our code to the server, we need to update our button to display a web view. To display a web view, we need to change the type to a web URL, and the URL is the link to our server web view. So I create a new variable URL web view order, and then go back to our app. We need to use our server link, open your app, and copy the app URL. And then the order info, and update the .env. Copy the name and update the .env.example. We get the URL from the .env file. Use the backtick, $, and curly braces, process.env.url web view order. Update the title, info lookup order. We also need to update parameter on the Heroku server. Update the Facebook app ID. Copy the value and update its value. And then update the URL for the web view. Paste the key and its value. And then the messenger extension to true to open the web view inside the messenger. If we set its value to false, we will open the web view inside a new tab. We need to update our code on the Heroku server, get out our files, we commit the message, and then git push Heroku master. Let's check our bot. Restart the conversation. We have the welcome message. This time I will click on the lookup order button and then click on info order. You can see we open up a web view. This is the view we decided before. We have the form for order lookup. We also validate the input field. I will fill the email address and then click on the file order. We will have the customer name. After we submit the form, the web view will be closed. The next thing we will do is to handle the data if the user click on the submit form. We need to update the title to set info. To handle the action user submits the form, first I create a new variable that responds and use a sync and a wait function. You try and catch. If we have any error, I will console.log that error and move our function into the try function. We need to await the Chatbot service call the send message with the sender request ID we get from request.body.psid, then the response we defined before. The PSID we get from the AJAX, the PSID we get from the data we send along with the AJAX request, and we set its value after we load the Facebook Messenger SDK. I will send two messages. The first message is a image and the second message is a text message. Because the customer name isn't a required field, so if the user doesn't fill the customer name, I will set the customer name to empty. Otherwise, I will get the customer name from the request.body. With the first response, I will send back to the user the info the user provide, including the username, the email address, and the order number. We get the email address from the request.body.email and do the same thing with the order number, request.body.order number. I update the second response with a text message. With checking your order, we will send you a message when the process is complete. And then I add a new comment. Because I only demo this feature, in the real project we will have a database to save the user order. So at this part, you can find the record in your database and send the data back to the user. Let's test our bot again. Restart the conversation. Choose the lookup order. Then set info. I will fill the customer name, HaryPham, and then the email address abc@gmail.com, the order number 123456. You can see we have a message bag including the customer name, the email address, and the order number. In this video, we already done the feature sending a carousel template to showing categories and then display a custom webview inside the messenger. In the next video, we will do the feature talk with an agent. Have a good day and don't forget to subscribe my channel to get the newest video.